Wrong one.
What you doing?
Jessica Baser is in her late 20s. However, when you look at her, you would think she is maybe 14 or 15 years old. She is very misunderstood.
Pregnancy was fairly uneventful, except she was way past her due date, and at 17 days late, they decided to admit me to the hospital and try to induce labor, which actually didn't work, and I ended up with a C-section. It was at her 6-month pediatrician appointment when he thought her gross motor development was delayed, and she had her first of many diagnoses. This one was benign congenital hypotonia, which means she was very floppy, didn't have normal muscle tone. I had not known that anything was the matter with her development. So when she was 16, adolescence was not kind to us. It was, I describe as a combination of the hormones of a teenager, the self-control of a 2-year-old, and the cognitive ability of a 4-year-old. Initially, over the first few years, seizures were very infrequent. It could be weeks or months between seizures. And as she got older, and especially as she approached adolescence, the seizures started to increase in frequency. So she had a fairly active and engaged with the world life, and that gradually decreased during adolescence and her early 20s as the seizures increased in function. She increased in frequency. She started losing neurological function. So she's not nearly, she doesn't have the motor skills now that she did as a, say, 11-year-old. She walks now with help. She needs a lot of help on steps. I haven't seen her write her name or draw a face. I've seen her just scribble for quite a few years now. So after some number of mornings of her sitting naked on the bed, refusing to put her clothes on, and she needed to go to school and I needed to go to work, I was really, really desperate to get more help for us. And the only way that was possible was by having her move into a group home. The basic model for developmental disabilities is that people are supposed to follow the normal rhythm of the day. That is, they live somewhere, and during the day they go out somewhere. Those who are high enough functioning go to jobs, whether with job coaches or on their own or whatever. Those who aren't capable of that, like Jessica, will go to programs that are called dayhabilitation, or dayhab for short, which I describe briefly as like kindergarten for adults. The other thing that's medically been very much of a problem with her is urinary tract infections, or UTIs, because for some reason that's not really well understood medically, UTIs really affect brain chemistry, and the most serious and dramatic one of those was in the summer of 2016, where she went into a condition called status epilepticus, where you just have one seizure after the next, and she ended up in Buffalo General in the ICU, intubated, on a respirator for close to 5 weeks while they tried to get the brain activity back down to normal.
Leading up to Jessica's hospitalization, I remember her laying on the couch every time I came to work, seizing nonstop. I believe she had 57 seizures prior to actually going to the hospital. She was barely able to keep her eyes open from what I can remember, and I just remember her kind of looking dead at a point. I knew that if she didn't go to the hospital very quickly, that I wasn't sure how much longer she would be with us. When we got to the hospital, they brought her immediately to a back room where doctors and nurses came. She was continuously seizing, and that's when they decided to intubate her. Both myself and my coworker were 19 and inexperienced at the time. I was asked to leave the room, and so was my coworker. They shut the door, and I remember just looking at my coworker, and we were just crying because Jessica's history has always been complicated to us, but we were put in a position where we had no clue what was going to happen to Jessica, and we also did not have the answers for doctors when they were looking for these answers.
Our experience with seizure meds has been that it's a trade-off or a balance between seizure control and sedation, because the major side effects of all of the meds is some level of sedation. So you're constantly balancing between, is she sleeping all day, not having as many seizures but zero quality of life, versus awake more of the day but higher risk of seizure. Our natural footage is not very interactive. We haven't been able to eliminate or control the seizures completely.
Each girl in the group home has a specific schedule that they follow every day, and they're given meds usually 3 times a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and once in the evening.
My name is Michael Rembus. I'm a professor in the history department and also the director of the Center for Disability Studies. What people don't understand about disabilities, there's a lot of things that people don't understand. Well, I mean, I think that they probably, at least from my perspective as a historian, don't understand the long history of discrimination and segregation that people with disabilities have faced, through institutionalization for most of the 19th and early 20th century, and then discrimination in jobs and housing and education and things like that since the mid-20th century, since they've been advocating for their rights and been advocating to move themselves out of institutions into the community.
Jessica cannot protect herself. She needs someone to speak for her. She needs someone to remind people that, yes, she has a disability, but before you just, reach in to change someone's clothes, you need to tell them, Jessica, I'm going to change your clothes. Sometimes people forget that Jessica does have her own thoughts, even though she cannot express them to people. And just like everyone else, she deserves to be treated in a way that people who can communicate for themselves are treated.
For most of human history, there's been discrimination against people with disabilities because of a lack of knowledge or understanding.
One reaction that would get, since Jessica is very pretty, and when she's smiling, she's really cute. So one interpretation of Jessica in a stroller was that she was the laziest child in the world and I was the most indulgent mother in the world. And that's true. And I would have comments like, look at that, a 10-year-old in a stroller, as though one would do that just to, anyway.
Jessica was behavioral when she was feeling better, and if I had to deal with behaviors, I was willing to deal with behaviors over watching Jessica seize. Yeah, I have a story about her behaviors, because she, like when she was feeling good, she would like to rock the boat, and you would be walking, everything would be good, and then boom, she would drop on the floor just to see what you would do. And what would you do? You would respond to her, help her get back up. Then she would drop again and make you help her get back up.
It can be very difficult. Kids were better than adults. Kids would just ask me, why is she in a stroller? And I'd say her muscles don't work as well as yours do. She can't walk as far as you can, and kids would be completely satisfied with that kind of explanation. It was frequently the parents who were upset and judgmental and sort of not thinking about why would a large child be in a stroller. Probably there's actually a good reason for it, but.
And then I started working at Campbell for 6 months, and I really started to develop individual relationships with the girls.
It's okay.
I started to develop individual relationships with all the girls, and I really understood each girl, and I forgot that they had disabilities when I really got to know them. I remember I would go out in public, and if I saw someone even dare to look at any girl like she was different from me, I was ready to defend any girl. It's not fair for people with disabilities to sit in a house and be on a routine, because we're not on routines. We wake up on Monday, and what we do on that Monday is not what we do on the following Monday. And for people in group homes, that is not the case. They follow a routine, and that routine doesn't really change unless they have staff that care for them and that want them to have quality of life.
One of the major problems for people with developmental disabilities, people like Jessica who's unable to live on her own, is the lack of group home availability in New York State. We were very fortunate to be able to develop a group home for Jessica and 4 other young women whom they all knew each other from various respite and recreational programs. So when we developed the house, it was a group of 20-year-olds living together.
Jessie is my friend.
The best way to promote access, whether it be to education or healthcare, or just to the community more generally, is through education and through making people more aware of the needs of people with disabilities, and also the importance of including them in society, and also all the benefits that they bring.
It's important to let people with disabilities think for themselves, and I think that's something that people don't do. They don't allow people with disabilities to think for themselves. They make decisions for them. So are they really learning? Are you helping them? For their entire lives, they're in a house with different staff all the time, different supervisors, people telling them what to do exactly during their routines. There's no change at all.